Welcome to another episode of the Libertarian Christian Podcast, project of the Libertarian Christian Institute and part of the Christians for Liberty Network. We are doing this live in the green room because I have special guests, Jim Babka and Jacob Winograd, who you'll see here in a moment because he's jumping off another live stream that he's hosting, and so he's running a little bit late. Thank you, Benjamin. And we will have a conversation with him here shortly. So for those of you who are just listening to the audio as a podcast, LCI or the Libertarian Christian Podcast, we actually run a YouTube channel as well, and we do some live streams from time to time. We call it the LCI Green Room. You just look that up. It's a playlist under the Libertarian Christian Institute's channel. And you'll also be able to, if you subscribe, you'll be able to get notifications when we're about to go live. So I'm here to talk with two good friends of mine, Jacob and Jim. I'm going to bring Jacob on the stage here. There we go. Hey, Jacob.
I've been invited, so I'm now allowed to be here. Sorry,
Nice.
I had to open with that.
Nope, it's good. It makes sense. Doesn't mean you're right about anything, but makes sense. Sorry, I'm already picking on you. Okay, so I'm here to have a conversation with two good friends of mine about the issue of immigration. And I want to introduce both of them here real quick.
Wait, is that what we're talking about tonight?
Yes, we're going to talk about immigration.
Oh.
Did I tell you it was something else?
I thought it was about baseball.
Ah, nice. Well, I mean, they're somewhat related, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
You could make that case. All right. That's Jim, and in his, I told him he needed to bring his sarcasm with him this time. So we are getting possibly a preview of Jim's personality. He's former press secretary for 2000 Libertarian Party presidential candidate Harry Brown, president of Downsize DC for over 2 decades, and currently the executive producer of Respect America and the host of the podcast Gracearchy with Jim Babka. Jacob, hey Jacob, thanks for jumping over on this live stream. You are part of the Libertarian Christian Institute team as host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast and frequent Green Room host, which literally just ended
Some people think I'm just the host of the Green Room, which is not true.
Yes.
Just to,
Yes, I know.
shatter that myth.
Yeah, shattering that myth. I am currently the host of the Green Room right now.
Yes.
And so the Green Room, Libertarian Christian podcasts are all part of the Christians for Liberty Network, but the Green Room is how we handle our live streams. So you might catch Jacob, you might catch me, and maybe one of these days you'll catch Alex Bernardo doing a live stream now that he knows he can.
Make him do it. We'll trick him into doing it.
We'll just make him do it. Okay. So back in May, so we're like second week of June here. Back in May, Jacob and I got to go to New York City and attend a Soho Forum debate on an issue that is near and dear to our hearts, and also see some people that we really like to see debate things. That's Dave Smith and Alex Nowrasteh. It was a topic of immigration, and it's created a bit of a discussion among libertarians in the Twitter sphere, in the blogosphere, in the podcastistan. I don't have a sphere for that. And so there's lots of episodes out there as a response. Now, Jacob and I actually did our own response together as a review of the debate and recap. We actually did a pre-debate recording. And so that episode will have already aired on Libertarian Christian Podcast. You can also catch it in the live streams, in the live feed of this channel, the ones you're looking at now, both Biblical Anarchy and the Libertarian Christian Institute's one. So all that to say, Jim also did his own response to the debate. And Jacob and Jim have a little bit of difference of opinion. I'm having them on because I want to have a three-way discussion about how do we sort of handle the discussion as libertarians, how do we view the topic of immigration as libertarians, and see where we can get in terms of the conversation. So this isn't really a debate. I've maybe framed it that way in my wording, but this is really meant to be more of a three-way conversation.
No, sorry.
Well, we're not taking votes like in the like at the Soho Forum, so maybe that's also part of it.
The real reason this thing we're doing here is we're doing what podcasters do, and we're taking one event and making 8 different episodes across 3 different shows.
Well, that is one way to approach summer when we all would like to take a little bit of time off, as you double dip a little bit. And anyway, so let's deal with this first. Let's start with the impetus for the conversation. Now, of course, libertarians have debated and discussed immigration and all kinds of other issues for many years, of course. But recently, this debate actually was essentially like sparked a fire, and it reignited a conversation to some extent. And you could even go back to say, well, Donald Trump actually did that because he appealed to libertarians. Libertarians were like, "Ooh, our vote might count this time," or something. And so some of us in the room voted for Trump. Not actually, I would say, in spite of his position on immigration, I should say. But what's that?
So I'm proud of you, Doug.
Okay. Yeah. Right. No, not at all. Anyway. I lost my train of thought, but what we're going to do is we're going to start with the actual brief takeaways from the debate. Both of you can kind of just kind of say like, hey, here's your impressions of how the debate went, and give us your general position on the topic of immigration. I'm going to let Jacob go first here.
All right. You should always let Jacob go first.
The debate was interesting. I went in actually thinking the debate resolution, as I said in our pre-debate recording that played on our stream, I thought the resolution was stacked against Dave, and that even though I know Dave is a very ample debater and very good at rhetoric and thinking on his feet, that I thought it was going to be hard because he had to basically word his arguments in a way that went with the resolution, which said that on libertarian grounds, it can be okay, especially in America today, to use force against immigrants who are not violent and not sick. And I was like, well, that's kind of giving away half the battle, and you're having to do it on libertarian grounds. I'll do this a little out of order. I'm very undecided on the immigration issue because I find that a lot of times people who take different sides or use different labels or whatnot are often talking past each other. I'm not for closed borders. I'm actually, if you go on like my Twitter feed, you wouldn't even know I have a problem with open borders because I've spent most of my time as of late just pushing back against the current Trump policies and the degree to which conservatives and some libertarians have been defending them. Nevertheless, I do also understand and even agree with some of the criticisms of open borders. I'm an ANCAP. I think the solution is to abolish the state and the state border entirely. And until then, we're just kind of dealing with, as Thomas Sowell said, no solutions and only trade-offs. Final word on the debate. Because of that, I went in and I think Alex did a good job at demonstrating some of the concerns about giving the government any control over immigration and the border. But I don't think from a strict debate level that he really engaged with some of Dave's arguments well enough to say that he won the debate. So even though I think Alex, I like both of them. I think they both have good insights. I think Alex did raise some things that even Dave had to chew on a little bit. But from a debate level, I think Dave won. But, we're here still talking about it because with libertarians, the debate is never settled. So unlike the science, which is.
Jim, what are your brief takeaways from the debate? And then we'll kind of get into the discussion.
Well, there is a such thing as a libertarian position, but saying that Dave did not extol the libertarian position is not saying he's not a libertarian. He's doing a lot of great work out there right now. His star's rising, but he did not argue for the libertarian position. I'm probably going to disagree with several things. That one of the things is the resolution actually was worded, and I discussed this in the show I did about this. Government restrictions on the immigration of peaceful and healthy people makes sense from a libertarian standpoint, especially in present day America. So each of the way that thing was awkwardly worded, there was actually a giveaway to each side in how it was structured. Especially in present day America was the giveaway to Dave's side because, oh my gosh, we have these certain situations and conditions that exist right now where we can't really be libertarian about this. And then the insertion that Alex got was peaceful and healthy people. So if you just had read this as a simpler, taking those two things out, it would be government restrictions on immigration makes sense from a libertarian standpoint, period, full stop. And that would have been the subject of debate. Those other two things cluttered it, and I'm not really sure that anybody got an advantage from that. But the real advantage is that most people, and this has been a slipping issue for a very long time, no longer acknowledge the reality of what it means to actually have immigration laws. What that means, full stop, is a bigger state. That's what it means. It means that people are going to be armed and they're going to be imposing those arms on human beings. And that's what we cared about. And the last thing I'll say is that Dave went further than just saying libertarian. He decided to invent a new version of voluntarism. And there's a whole school of thought that's been developing within the libertarian movement called anarcho-capitalism, which is, in the case of immigration, not very anarchist. But when they make their case, they've clearly built a brand around this idea. And part of that brand is focused on an emphasis on property as the key way of understanding libertarianism, or how to govern or how to interact socially. When we have a dispute, we look at who owns the property and we make a decision from there. I don't think that's exactly the right way to do that. I'm from a group of people that would call themselves voluntarists. And the way that Dave tried to manipulate that term and represent it back to us as a package, I hope this is not a harbinger of things to come, where anarcho-capitalists who believe in a variety of right-leaning government functions are suddenly going to start calling themselves voluntarists. Because voluntarist means one simple thing. I get to choose who I associate with. And that's what matters here in this immigration issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a fundamental difference. And I think I do understand where they're coming from. When you start with property and who owns property and how that all works, a lot of Dave's arguments make sense. He chose instead, though, to call himself a voluntarist, which has to do with, I get to choose who I associate with, including who governs me. Those are my decisions to make, no one else's.
Okay, I'm going to give my thoughts. I'm going to kind of split the difference maybe a little bit here and say that what I've seen on X and, that's really all I see stuff. And I mean, I hear stuff in certain podcasts and so forth. But what I see on X as the sort of argument for we got to do something about whatever people think the immigration problem is. I think Dave represented the most, I wouldn't say the most libertarian, but like it's a libertarian stab at here's what we could do to say that it's okay to be against immigration in modern day America. And he took a stab at it that I was not convinced by. And Alex took the quintessential, what I would call the libertarian position on, well, no, the government shouldn't have a say in this. This is a transaction between Juan and John, right? Like whatever you want to say, this is a transaction between individuals. And that's kind of the approach that he took. And so if I'm analyzing the way that both of these guys took it, I would basically say that Dave is taking it to we as a group of people don't want immigrants here. Why aren't we listening to this group of people who don't want to have immigrants here? And Alex was saying the state is not the basic apparatus by which you decide what we is. And basically saying that, like, no, the government shouldn't decide. And so it's a matter between individuals. I don't know what you guys think of that, if that's kind of an assessment, but I think to a large extent, Alex represents the traditional libertarian perspective. Dave is representing the kind of sort of maybe sounds like libertarian perspective that is appealing to a lot of people, typically from the right, probably. Maybe even some from the left. I could think of people like Brett Weinstein who might be attracted to that sort of argument.
I'm a former Bernie bro, Doug.
I know, but you're not one anymore. And I'm not here to put your views down. So part of this is just letting you also explain, like, well, where is this and how can we parse this out a little bit? So anyway, that's kind of where I came down from it. I was a little disappointed in the collectivist sort of talk that Dave seemed to give credence to, like, well, we don't want these people here. I didn't like that too much. But anyway, I'll let you guys respond. I'm not going to pick a person this time, though.
Oh, spontaneous order doesn't work, Doug. No. So listen, there's a lot in what you both said that I agree with, and that if Dave was here tonight, he would also agree with. And I feel like part of the way that I frame this, and that this is just my framing, you could disagree with the framing perhaps, but it is that I think there is a problem in terms of theory and praxis. Because I think libertarian theory is well established, well argued, I mean, we litigate it to death in our, it used to be Facebook groups, now it's, Signal chats, but, we have tons of amazing libertarian intellectuals and writers and thinkers who have really boiled down the legal theory, the way that, how would a libertarian society give us defense? How would a libertarian society give us roads, right? Like we have the theory down to maybe not, I wouldn't say that the libertarian science is settled, but it's close to that, right? It's pretty well established. How we move in a very unlibertarian world towards a more libertarian world is where we don't have very well grounded, not just theory, but just praxis, right? For as long as libertarianism has been a thing, and you have think tanks and the Libertarian Party and Ron Paul and all that, for as much as the liberty movement has been growing and making more libertarians is great, that has not had a huge impact in shrinking the state or the growth of the state. The state continues to grow, and there was some debate between Dave and Alex about how fast the government's growing, but it's still growing, right? Whether you want to quibble about the rate of expansion, I think it's growing pretty fast, but and that's in both parties. But I think that's kind of where this immigration debate partly rests, is related to that question of we all, you, Doug, me, and Jim, and even Dave would all agree that our ideal society is one with basically without a state, and that you don't have this monopoly of law and violence that is deciding for everyone and centrally planning for everyone, who crosses this imaginary line. But I think what Dave's trying to reckon with, and I think more libertarians need to reckon with, is like, how do our ideas apply and operate in the real world while we're living in these, unfortunately, they are collectivist systems. And so everything that you do, not everything you do, but a lot of things you do affect, the people around you, because of the degree to which the state, has this forced, integration apparatus through voting and democracy, and your taxes being taken to fund certain things that you didn't consent to, but they're funding that anyway. Even if it's not your tax money, then it's just your savings whittling away because of endless spending. So yeah, I think that's part of what is going on here, which is why the resolution was not aimed at Dave's favor, because I think Dave was having to kind of say the libertarian position is this, but I wouldn't even say that. The libertarian position is what your shirt says, Doug. It's abolish everything. But how do we get there, right? And, as much as we wish there was a Rothbard button in front of us to blister our thumb on, that's not reality. And so insofar as Dave kept on, pushing libertarians to deal with reality, that is something that I'm sympathetic to as far as on Dave's side, which I think Alex, more so than other opponents that Dave's gone up against, tried to do that, but I don't know that he quite met that bar.
If you're going to show up at a debate, whether you're Jordan Peterson or you're Dave Smith, if the subject says Christian in the line or libertarian in the line, that's the debate you signed up for. I recognize he was on the road quite a bit before then, but it's not unfair to say, well, gee, poor Dave, he had to come and argue this on a libertarian basis. That's just, I don't know. Like that was what the mission was that night, was to articulate a libertarian position.
Jim, do you think, well, actually, I'll ask this to both of you. It seemed to me that, and I think I said this in your and my episode, Jacob, where it seems to me that you could argue in some sense that it makes sense for Americans to have immigration restrictions for some current situation that, like, from an American perspective, sounds like this would be a good idea, but you can't argue it from libertarian grounds. Or if you're going to be a libertarian and say, well, we can argue for immigration restrictions against peaceful and nonviolent people. Did it say nonviolent? I can't remember. You read it earlier, Jim, but against peaceful people. Then there has to be this like overwhelming circumstance that peaceful people still aren't allowed in, or something like that. And it doesn't really, like, grounded in the principles of libertarianism, just didn't seem to come out there. So, yeah, those are the thoughts that I had. It's like, well,
I think it's spot on. It was peaceful. It was peaceful people. That's
okay. So peaceful people, like, I don't know. I guess
healthy and peaceful.
Healthy and peaceful. Those are the two. I knew there were two adjectives there.
Which, by the way, Dave had a moment where I agree with him on something. there is a compromise. Chase Oliver put this out. He talked while he was running for president about an Ellis Island 2.0. Now, leaving aside the fact that the state botches everything it touches and costs too much and harms people as it does it, an Ellis Island 2.0 I don't expect to work out all that well. Okay, I don't understand really the purpose of it, except that it's a political solve that you hand to people who are not quite ready for the for real freedom. You say, okay, well, if we for now, in order to be able to get the blessings of immigration, if we need to make this concession where we go through this symbolism like we do while we're walking through the airport with the TSA, that somehow or other we're vetting all of these people, then you do that. But Dave made the point that this is not a libertarian idea. It involves intruding on people's civil liberties in a pretty major way. They're going to be tamed. They're going to be inspected. They're going to be poked and prodded, potentially held for months. It's not something that we should lay out necessarily as the solution. It's merely a concession that, okay, well, if we can show you that these people are healthy and peaceful, will you let them in? And so it's not, all these other sub-steps are not really libertarian steps.
It's keeping something within most people's Overton window. We can look back at Ellis Island and say, okay, there were people back then who didn't want Italians and didn't want Jews and didn't want Irish in or whatever. But we can look at them and say, what's that?
Oh, it was Irish.
Yeah, right. But we can look back and say, okay, that was just overblown. Everything worked out fine, guys. Yeah. And so people can imagine that kind of thing working. It's sort of like what libertarians say, well, if we just got back to the Constitution, that'd be better than what we have today, even though it may not be what we would like. Go ahead, Jacob.
No, I mean, I think I agree with the way Jim phrased it and parsed it there. I think that's just kind of getting to so we can, I think we could probably agree that we could quibble and debate about debate performance, but that might be, kind of besides the point. I think it'd be more productive to focus on the idea. So whether or not Dave showed up and debated the right resolution or debated that resolution the right way, I could be persuaded maybe that, he was wrong. I thought that the resolution was worded in a way that made it harder for him to do it. If I was going to, attempt to steel man it, I guess, I think what he's trying to get at is that kind of what you guys just said, that it is a libertarian position to move towards a more free society. And so if there are steps along the way that aren't perfectly adhering to the non-aggression principle, which is what we believe in, that we don't initiate force against peaceful people, but we, other than some kind of snap of the finger, some kind of Thanos, Infinity Stone gauntlet that, instead of eliminating 50% of the state, eliminates 100% of the state. What are we going to do? There are going to be steps along the road where the policy is still violating the NAP. But would it be better? Even Alex was like, well, yeah, the Ellis Island policy would be better. And I think if I'm going to, I'll bring up something you said in your episode, Jim, which I agree with. I think one of the weaknesses to Dave's argument, not just in this debate, but when he's communicating it just in general, is that he is often not aspirational enough to the point where he is clearly communicating. And I know Dave, so I have I give him maybe a charitable read, or I just know more from talking to him, that what he's arguing for isn't this is the ideal, right? But it is more in the spirit of, and this is why he used the Ellis Island example, is that that what we have now is, about as far from the ideal as possible. And if you're already willing to grant me that Ellis Island is an imperfect solution, but better than now, then he used a very crass metaphor at the beginning to make this point, but which was that, he said, if a woman says she'll sleep with you for $1 million, then you counter with, will you sleep with me for $1? And she goes well, who do you think I am? It's we already know that. Now we're just negotiating. So Dave is saying, if we've already entered the conversation of what is getting us away from the status quo, which seems to be bad for multiple reasons, and gets us to something that's at least better than that, and maybe moving towards either the best we can do right now, or decentralizing from maybe the federal government doing it more to the states doing it. That's what Dave's, I think, trying to press on, is to say that
So you're saying that basically, as long as we're both making some sort of compromise, why can't mine be just as libertarian as yours?
Right. Or, or at the very least, like we have to, there's two options. Option one is we enter into the compromise and then we're just debating over the trade-offs. Or you have to, and this is what Dave was pressing Alex to do, and Alex kind of dodged it, which I thought was not I guess it was like, maybe Alex didn't have a good answer, and so it was better to dodge it. But I think what Dave was pressing Alex to do is to say, like, if you're not going to enter that space with me, then you have to bite the bullet and say that you would not put a limit to how many people come in here right now, right? And maybe you think that's a reductio ad absurdum example, the one he brought up about like everyone from India coming here, but he's just saying like, just for the sake of argument, like, are you saying that right now, if, the answer to that specific question, like, is there a number at that point you would say, nope, that's too many people coming in? And if you say, nope, at no point am I ever going to say that we should ever allow the government to restrict, even if it's 1 million or 2 million or 5 million or 10 million or 20, like, nope, just an unlimited number. Like, if that's what you want to do, fine, but you have to bite that bullet. And I think Dave is saying, like, if you're not going to bite that bullet, then you're playing the same game I am. And we need to have a conversation. I'll end on this. There's a phrase which I love, even though I have grown to be sadly disappointed by the person who came up with it, which is, and I'll modify it for this conversation. We have to be careful to not live in voluntaryville in our heads. Again, that's the theory and the praxis. We all agree on the theory, but I think what Dave's interested in, which I'm interested in too, is like, how can we increase liberty in the real world? And I don't think that just like, I don't want to keep rambling on. I'll let Jim respond. I have more I can say on this, but I don't want to do what people do in debates where they spread and just throw as much spaghetti up against the wall as they can.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because there's a lot there. There's a lot there. The irony of that joke about whether or not, we've already established what you are, now we're just negotiating, is that it actually works against the case of watering down the message. So I want to ask you a question. This is hopefully a very simple question to answer, Jacob. How soon would you like to have liberty? How soon would you like to be in a situation where we have your anarcho-capitalist or even voluntarist society? How soon would you want that?
I mean, I guess I would say as soon as possible.
Sooner rather than later? Is that a safe answer?
Rather than later, yeah.
Yeah, okay. The importance of that is if you don't state it, if you don't introduce people to it, if you don't hold it up as the platinum standard, this is what we believe and this is how it'll work if we get there. Okay, if you're not doing that every single time, then you're not advancing the message. Full stop. What you're doing is you're participating in the system that exists as it is right now. And you're saying, hey, we have a little patch over here. In fact, our patch works a little better than your patch. And why don't we try our patch? And the powers that be are going to, of course, push you aside and ignore you. And people aren't going to be attracted to the message because you're not saying anything that's different, unique, revolutionary in any way. And so I reject the idea that I got to live in the practicalville. I don't have a title in front or behind my name that says I have any power to swing any gavels or billy clubs or nightclubs or draw guns on anybody. I'm not a congressman or a councilman. I don't have any of those things. I don't know why I have the responsibility to fix the mess that the left and right statists have been busily creating. What I want to do instead is I want to hold up a standard to which everyone can repair. And then I want to leave the results in the hands of God. Now, if maybe in the course of a conversation, I'm in a position where I can negotiate with somebody and I can move things in my direction, why, of course I'm going to do that. Most of my career has been spent running an organization called downsizedc.org. And we worked on what we called a transpartisan basis, where most people spend most of their time compromising between left and right. And they have this center spot that kind of pivots and runs everything where nobody can make up their mind, where principled people on the left and principled people on the right get ignored in that transaction. We said, oh, let's try this differently. We went and worked with the left. We went and worked with the right, depending on what the issue was. Surveillance, we worked with the left. War, during the Bush administration, we worked with the left. We worked with the right on guns and taxes. We worked on a variety of these things over the years. Obamacare, healthcare, we worked with the right on those issues. So we worked with those people, but we would find a way to work in a transpartisan nature a lot of times. Sometimes we would find ways to work with the people who are on the principled left and on the principled right. We would find ways to find common ground between those people. I've been involved in all of those things. We push bills called the Read the Bills Act, the Write the Laws Act, and the One Subject at a Time Act, all introduced by Senator Rand Paul, that if they were the rule, if this was the way the government run, the government would move slower and it would start to slow and it would eventually reverse size just by having these laws in place. So I'm all for finding levers. I'm all for trying to find ways to advance our message. But if you're going to put me on a debate stage and you're going to give me the opportunity to spell out in bright, shining lights the wonderful world that we have when we stop using violence and coercion against one another, then that's the standard I'm going to hold up. And I'm not going to spend all my time saying, guys, you got to learn to live in reality. Because I get reality from all the networks and I get reality from the major newspapers and I get reality all the time. And I'm just another voice in that loud din. But if I start to hold up something special in the darkness, a light in the darkness, that's where the opportunity to move people in our direction is.
Jim, are you really getting reality from the big news?
No, and I don't think we were getting reality in this debate either.
Honestly. No, and I'm being facetious there.
No, I know.
Does it sound like would one way of saying that you would say that it's okay to I don't want to use the word compromise in the way that like I'm saying compromise your actual position, but like when you're negotiating or say, as a libertarian, there's the position. That's what you're saying. Mm-hmm. And it is a light in the darkness type of position. Here's the vision we have for freedom and prosperity and human flourishing. And then there's the nuts and bolts of working with people. And since you can't always get your way, you sometimes have to compromise on the actual policy. That's a better place to be than saying, well, a libertarian position can be a compromise.
Okay, so let me build the whole argument. First, the Fabian socialists kept moving very gradually, slowly in the direction that they wanted. And they would win and they would celebrate and they'd wake up the next morning and start moving again. They never stopped. They never settled. They never gave up. And through generations, they managed to change things. So I can appreciate that. So along comes a patron saint, one of the biggest, brightest lights in the history of libertarianism named Milton Friedman. And Milton and Rose, his wife, decide that they are very, very passionate about getting kids out of government schools. That's an important mission. I understand where they're coming from on this. And they say, you know what we need to do? We need to create a program called vouchers. So I would say the rule is simply this. And I think this translates to the situation we're discussing right now. If we start a voucher program, eventually there would be demand for more vouchers, bigger vouchers for more people, different types of vouchers. The voucher program would become this massive government program. And of course, there's the golden rule of politics, which is he who has the gold makes the rules. So the legislatures and the judges and everybody else would start attaching strings to all that money as it's flowing into what were formerly private institutions, corrupting them. By the way, it does. I can tell you the charter schools are very corrupt. They lose sense of their mission. And so it doesn't work. It's a cul-de-sac. In other words, you drive into the development, you can't go out on that same street. There's no exit. You got to turn around and go back. And why would you build something purposely it's going to cul-de-sac? Now, you could instead say, like they did in New Hampshire, we're going to give everyone a tax credit. And Jacob, you have children, right? Right now?
5.
So we're going to give me one of their names.
Daniel.
Okay, so we're going to give I want to give instead of paying my taxes to the state of New Hampshire, I get a credit dollar for dollar where I can give the money to pay Daniel's tuition. Now we have something where we're starting to work together and we're starting to, and this, by the way, it's not perfectly how it works, but you get the idea. It's not a cul-de-sac anymore. Everybody's fleeing the system. And the money that I'm giving is not government money anymore. It's my money, right? And if that program expanded, then that would really liberate everybody. Now, is it perfect? Should we even had the taxes confiscated from us in the first place? Absolutely not. But obviously, it's a step in the proper direction. And it doesn't lead to more government in the long run. I'm for all of that. But I still, even in New Hampshire, would hold up the ideal that there shouldn't be any government or state involvement at all in schools, and that is the best or most optimal solution that allows the maximum amount of flourishing.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you and the way you put it in your podcast that Dave was not aspirational. I think that is one of his weaknesses when he talks about this subject. I think he is. It's ironic that on other subjects he sometimes is could be accused of the opposite, right? Like like when it comes to Israel and Gaza, he's like, you don't blow up innocent Palestinians. He's like, what do you do about Hamas in the tunnels? He's like, we can have a conversation about that, and that could be complicated, but I'm still going to insist you don't blow up, just completely level Gaza in your mission to destroy Hamas, just because they might have made it more difficult, right?
The same thing's true of his position on the Fed. He's great on that too, right?
Right. So I agree with you that if we're going to engage in this conversation about what are, for lack of a better term, principled compromises in the status quo that and I agree, even if you get those implemented, it doesn't mean you then rest your laurels and just be like, hang your hat up and like, now I'm done. It's like you celebrate the victory and you move on to, what's next, right?
Mm-hmm.
You should always be pushing. So I would agree with you on that. On the flip side, I still think that it then begs the question of not every issue is going to have keyhole solutions, I think, as much as we like to think that there are. And I also think sometimes there is almost a underlying presupposition in the way voluntarists and ANCAPs think, or certain ones at least, about how we would create a free society. And as much as we can't centrally plan a free society, we have the issue of we can't centrally plan how we would roll back the state. But that doesn't mean that all things are equal in terms of how you do that, that there wouldn't be disastrous consequences to abolishing or removing state control from certain aspects of society before other ones. And you can easily demonstrate this through kind of reductio cases, but I think they kind of prove the point, which is like, I would not, advocate that we abolish funding to prisons to feed the prisoners before we end the drug war and free all the, people who are locked up for victimless crimes, right? Like that's a bit of a reductio because no one is necessarily advocating for that. But now another good one that's closer to reality, it's closer to our actual reality right now, which I know Jim will deal with because as he, likes to tell us, the 5 most important issues of every election are the debt, the debt, the debt, the debt, and the debt. There is actually.
Thank you for watching.
Yes. I just saved you the breath. You didn't have to say it this episode.
Yeah. Also, we're establishing precedents here that we are a group of friends having this debate and disagreement. We're not. This is not.
Right. But insofar as that is very true, Republicans, even when they manage to try to do something quasi-libertarian, kind of make things worse because it turns out when you just cut some taxes without reducing spending and not fixing the underlying monetary reality of the way currency works in our fiat currency system, that doesn't actually produce more economic freedom. It just creates a larger deficit and more inflation and I know they think, well, if we cut taxes, it increases revenue and all that. Like that actually is what you could call trickle down economics. And it's not free market economics. It's the opposite. It's just crony capitalism, kind of a Freudian slip there. It's crony capitalism, right? It's just, it's what people like me who used to be Bernie bros would call it's the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, right? We just had the wrong understanding of what was causing that. But I think these are examples of I like to put it this way. There are, when it comes to all of us who are, abolishitarians, right? I call it the new term. We would all abolish the state at every aspect of society. But I don't think that it's necessarily true. Well, I'll put it this way. There's 2 types. There is the particular order and the no particular order abolishitarians. There are some abolishitarians who would say, I don't care what the order is. I don't care what the issue is that, I will abolish taxation before I abolish the Federal Reserve, or I will abolish, in the reductio case, the tax funds to feeding the prisoners before you release the prisoners. They go you just take whatever you can get no matter what. And then there's the other persuasion, which I'm more sympathetic to, which would say, this is more like a Jenga puzzle where like we kind of do have to be careful about like, how does this come apart in a way that doesn't lead to more tyranny down the road because things just get
Jacob, can I ask you a question about what you're saying right now? Because I don't think I disagree with what you're saying, but I'm not sure it applies here. And the reason was Dave arguing that effectively the policy that's being pursued by the Trump administration right now is pretty much right? Is it okay to take people out of the country because they're damaging our schools? Because he gave an example about a border school and how new people had shown up and how that had taken their school away. It sounded to me like he was arguing for deportations. So while you're sitting here saying, hey, you know, we got to get there kind of gradually, we got to work our way through this stuff or whatever, he was actually arguing for a position that based on association, which he called forced, that other people who were peaceful should be driven out because we don't want to be around those people. And the only way to do that was with the state. And so I'm hard pressed to see how like all the stuff we're talking about moving directionally fits into that frame.
Can I ask it? I want to ask it just a little bit differently. It seems to me that I don't know what the roadmap is from more ICE to Ancapistan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, so again, this is where I'm coming just with more knowledge of everything Dave's ever said about the subject. And like anybody, if you pull clips from everything everyone ever said on a certain topic, you might find points where they say things that seem kind of contradictory. And Dave recently on his podcast said that he supports mass deportations. Now, he didn't qualify it. He didn't go into what he means by that and how would that work. You know, and I certainly am very skeptical about mass deportations. I think that, and even talking to Dave after that debate, you know, I said, listen, even if you're right about there might be a need to, in the interim, restrict immigration coming in, and maybe the immigration that's already happened is causing problems, you can't have a situation where the cure is worse than the disease. And I think just the amount of centralized power, the amount of show of force, the amount of just money that it would take to really go and do the kind of mass deportations that Trump and Trump supporters talk about. Yeah, like if we're talking about trade-offs, that's not a good trade-off. That is expanding state power way too much. That is way too much aggression. And I've been very critical about mass deportations. I would qualify that against a couple things. One, there is such a thing as like someone crossing the border and then you immediately catch them, and I guess you could say you're deporting them if they just came in a day ago and you track them down and you just take them back across the border. That's just the Border Patrol doing it. So I do think sometimes we have to be...
That's a close equivalent to not letting them across.
Right. Like we have to be willing to kind of like, you know, understand that as you like to say, Doug, language is fluid. It has usage and not meaning. I'm invoking a total other inside joke that Jim's not aware of, I don't think.
I actually used that on Jim once and he didn't respond, but we'll have to, yeah.
We'll explain that after.
Yeah.
That's some deep LCI lore, but but yeah, I also know that, you know, Dave is a radical decentralization guy. And so when he's talked about this before, like people say like, well, like, does that mean you support ICE? No, he wants to abolish ICE. And I actually thought he missed a very important opportunity to talk about this in the debate when Alex, in the Q&A, someone asked about the Constitution and if the federal government should be doing it. I know Dave's position is that actually it would be better to kick this back to the states to some extent. That would have been a perfect opportunity to say, yeah, you know what, if the federal government's doing it, that probably is unconstitutional, and that's a good argument to just kick this back to the states anyway. And have a more decentralized approach, because I know he agrees with abolishing ICE, abolishing the entire Department of Homeland Security for that matter. So there's, I think part of the problem where people talk past each other, and this doesn't often come out in a formal Oxford debate like this, is like, what is your actual position? What are you prescribing? And I can't say that I agree with everything Dave prescribes. There are certain things that I disagree with, or I at least go, okay, like maybe I would agree in like a compromise situation, but like these are still going to be, we all agree. And even Dave said in the debate, we're all very concerned about the Hayekian problem of not, the second order consequences and state solutions to solve state problems stacking up. And that is always not the ideal, right? And so that's why you never stop. But I also think what isn't helpful is when people, and maybe Dave bears some responsibility in how he sells himself, but I don't think it is right or charitable to say that what Dave wants is closed borders, and what Dave wants is actually to, what his heart and what he's aiming at is to increase government control over the movement of people compared to the status quo. I think what he's trying to say is we have to try, find a way to balance, finding a way to allow free trade. He's not a protectionist. He's not for tariffs. We have to allow free trade, and there has to be some free movement, but we have to weigh that with people coming in here in massive amounts of numbers, and the problems that have, and the consequences of if you were to go with as we move away from the current status quo, is it correct for libertarians to say the correct state policy is an open borders policy? I think that's to me, that's more at the heart of what the debate really is.
Okay. So Jacob, you've said in our private chat with, the three of us and even in our LCI group chats that open borders versus closed borders is to some extent oversimplified and maybe unhelpful way of framing it. Right. So we could talk all day about what Dave Smith might believe or so and so forth. Where would you, because I know that you don't always agree with him or how he's framed it, or even some of the things that he's sort of allowed or, given, permission in a sense. Where are you on this? I mean, I know that you and I are both in our group at LCI. We're known for being willing to hold more than one position on something, to some extent, depending on what it is. But where are you on this? I mean, is this, if it's not open borders versus closed borders, what is the liberty direction for you? What gets us into more liberty? The
liberty direction, and I agree with Jim that I kind of get what Dave was trying to do with the opening of trying to couch it in voluntarism. But I do think, upon further reflection, I get how that is a little messy too. The more appropriate way would have been the way Jim suggested, which it is private property rights. And I think the direction that this is what Hoppe argued for, this is, Rothbard later when he changed his position on borders argued for, that what we have to imagine is that the way a truly free society works is that the only legitimate borders are property borders, and that the only thing that regulates anything in a truly voluntary society is the market. It's contract law. It's you can use a road depending upon the rules of the person who owns the road, right? You can, and traveling to a specific area in the world requires on, you using entirely just your own resources to voluntarily interact with other people in the world. And what Dave is saying is that the introduction of a nation state, which is not voluntary, it's a construction of fiat. And this is what I agree with that. So I'll stop saying it's Dave's position. It's my position too. The open borders position is not a close enough approximate to a libertarian legal order because there is the tragedy of the commons. There is and that it creates artificial, so closed borders is wrong because it just shuts everything down. And that's not how a libertarian society would work. But also, the immigration crisis we have right now, we've had for several years, the record numbers we had over Biden, that's also not a free market outcome. That has to do partly with the perverse incentives underneath everything. It has to do with sometimes, drug traffickers or even, NGOs intentionally, displacing people here. This is something Rothbard's talked about in Nations by Consent, an essay he wrote where he, and others have talked about this too, how like the USSR, when they were trying to gain control over the territories that they had claimed, they did ethnic population displacement to make it easier to, gain control over the populations that they were trying to gain control over by creating, sort of a dilution of the culture and the norms there and stuff. And so yeah, the actual free market libertarian solution is private borders. And if we're forced to have a state, and we're forced to have to like think about these compromises. We have to think about them along the lines of private property and what puts more control over the movement back in the hands of individuals getting as local as possible, and open borders doesn't achieve that. And I think even to some extent, Jim might agree with me that open borders doesn't achieve that, although he might disagree with the solutions that people like Dave or myself might come up with. I don't quite agree with all Dave's solutions, but I'm somewhere between him and Ellis. To kind of say where I'm at, between Chase and Ellis Island and full-blown Hoppian sponsorship system is kind of where I think there's fruitful ground for discussion about a policy that is somewhat the best of both worlds.
Well, Jim, there's all the spaghetti for you.
Yeah. So there.
No. That I'm being mean. That was actually less spaghetti than it probably sounded. You took a while there to elaborate what you believe there, Jacob, and I appreciate that, because I do feel like sometimes when the topic of the debate kind of, I set this up at the beginning. It's like, hey, there was this debate that was had, and everybody's talking about this debate, and not everybody's talking about, well, what do we believe, and what do we want? So,
right. And to be fair, that's a criticism of Dave that's fair, which is that he's not been aspirational enough on what the true solution is, and he doesn't even always do a good job at advocating, like, well, here are the policy norms that I want. So,
all right, Jim, deal with the not really spaghetti.
So there's a lot of things I'm not going to get to in the time that we have left, because there was an awful lot to hit there. I wish I could, for example, channel Harry Brown, for example. Right now, I just not going to have that time to do that.
Right.
I want to focus on this idea that there's a number, and that somehow or other we have to deal with the fact that lots of people are going to come here and our system's not ready to sustain them. And what that means is that the root of all of this problem is that we have the state, and it makes everything worse. It worsens everything it touches. And that includes whether or not people can get together. Because Alex made very clear during the course of the debate that on capitalism and culture, we've more than welcomed these people. So I was mentioning to you that before we came on the show, I've had quite a day here. And one of the things that's happened in my day is that we are trying to get a young man from South America who's doing some work for us and Students for Liberty to Freedom Fest right now. And he misplaced his passport. He's an Ecuadorian citizen living in Peru. And what's going to happen to him is he's spent the entire day in LAX, which is like the worst place in the world to be right now, given that there's a riot going on just down the road at Paramount, right? But he is stuck in LAX. A Hispanic gentleman, speaks great English. His name's Juan Carlos. He's a beautiful man, very, very nice guy. He has been stuck in an airport all day, and we've been trying to figure out how to get him out. And it's been nigh onto impossible. And at moments, I'll be honest, I was concerned that he was going to get sucked into the system. And who knows what happens to him next, because we've heard some of those horror stories. And so I've been a little bit nervous all day, and we've been texting back and forth. We've been trying to our team has been trying to keep in touch with him and give him as much aid as possible. And his situation is so complicated that he's not going to get to go home. He's going to have to go back to Ecuador. He won't be able to be with his wife. Now, here's my issue. I hope that what I just told you moved you a tiny bit, because when you start talking about 500,000 people or 500 million people coming from any country, when Dave said that, what that was designed to do was stoke fear. And the politicians do this all the time. They try to stoke fear amongst us. And they do it over abstract bases, like borders, for example. Borders don't exist. States don't exist. All of those things are abstractions. What matters at the end of the day are the individuals.
Amen. Preach it.
And so these individuals who want to come here to increase their happiness, their harmony, and their prosperity, because we all have a fundamental drive to be happy. They're coming here to try to have happiness, harmony, and prosperity. They are the essential unit in this question. And anything that you're going to do here has to do two things. One, take into account their humanity and say, oh, okay, I recognize they want to be happy, happiness, harmony, and prosperity. Okay, they're neither picking my pocket nor breaking my leg. So yeah, I don't have any issue with you going and pursuing your happiness. Go for it. And second, that we cannot use coercive force to stop them from those things. So I operate off of a principle. We talk about it a lot during our podcast. I'm employed partially as well to promote this idea called the natural principle of human respect is the basis of it. It says that anytime you use coercion, threats, or violence, you reduce the happiness, harmony, and prosperity of the person. Every single time, it's a principle. It works like gravity. It's a cause and effect relationship. You use the coercion, cause the decrease in happiness. So we're starting with people out there who are trying to make a better life for themselves. And there's like, this isn't going to work if you're listening to podcast land, but I'm holding my hands at the middle fingers to kind of create a straight line, a threshold. And what we're doing is we're pushing people below that threshold. We're reducing their happiness, their harmony, and their prosperity. We're giving them new artificial problems to deal with through all of these abstractions. And we're not actually elevating them in any way. Because you see, we don't have to do anything. If they get to come here, their natural drive is to be happier, and they will start even actualizing. So what is happening now in our current system is it's reducing happiness, harmony, and prosperity. But if we simply leave those people to pursue their dreams, their happiness and harmony and prosperity will increase. And the essential unit is that. So what ends up happening is if you start to say, well, what happens if 500,000 or 10 million or whatever get in? You are now moving into policy land where you're going to be able to use some kind of force to manage the outcomes on these things. And yes, this is an aspirational question, and this is what I aspire to. I aspire to a day when everyone can move about as free human beings, pursuing their happiness peacefully, pursuing their prosperity peacefully, pursuing their health peacefully, pursuing their just being peaceful with everyone around them. That's what I look forward to. I think the state corrupts all of this from soup to nuts and it seeps into the cracks in ways we don't even have the time to begin to talk about, and damages our culture, damages our relationships with people. Yeah. So why did I start with Juan Carlos? Because when you start to think about an individual, and by the way, you go through the day that I go through where you're praying for another man, you are worried about him. You're concerned about him. When you have that feeling, you're in the right place. You're in the divine spot right now where you're recognizing the image bearer that you're talking about. But when you start talking about massive numbers, well, didn't Joseph Stalin say that 1 death's a tragedy and 1 million deaths is a statistic? I don't want to do statistics anymore. Libertarian approach ought to be personalized.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, respectfully. I mean, I'm moved
which
by
part?
those.
Which part? I mean, my guess is that you're probably moved by this guy's plight, but
yeah,
so I don't want you to give off that impression.
That's the second sentence that was going to come out of my mouth is I'm definitely moved by his plight, but I'm also moved by the plight of the children who are the victims of mass shooters in schools. It doesn't mean that I, we have to be careful. So I agree that conservatives play in fear. Democrats play in fear, right? So I'm very understanding to that. But we can also
500 million Indians. That was designed to stoke fear.
Well, there are definitely polls out there that show that if we had open borders tomorrow, that, I mean, maybe not 500 million, but that I think it's close to like 50 to 100 million people who want to move here if they could tomorrow. Now, logistically, could they all come in all at once? No, of course not. But the point is that when you have, so everything you said, Jim, is 100% correct. The state distorts everything. But I just would press to say the state distorts everything, and that includes the border, which we agree shouldn't exist, but it does exist. And we have historical precedent that shows the state can, as much as it can weaponize it to keep people in, boy, it can also weaponize it to bring a bunch of people in at the, for its own imperial and totalitarian pursuits, at the expense of the people who were already living there. And that's not a free market or voluntary or private property rights-based outcome that we as libertarians should cheer on or defend or even advocate for. I do think that insofar as, your aspirations go, yes, of course, what we want is a society where human dignity is respected, and that, everyone is understood to be image bearers of God, and that's one of the foundations for why it's wrong to initiate force against them. Mm-hmm. I said this on my live stream with Dave, and I guess this will be one of the last things I say here as well again, which I think we need to have a foot in both sides of this sort of, these two different buckets. The bucket of concern about the aspirational and the theory, but then also in the concern about the actual material reality, and that includes looking at the consequences of policies and looking at statistics. And I mean, Alex does that. He looks at statistics and stuff. A lot of his arguments are based on that, and then we have to interpret those, right? Just like we have to interpret the statistics that came out about COVID mandates and vaccine mandates and all that. And so all that to say that I agree that, listen, the way Mises put it is that, like, yes, what we believe in is social cooperation, peace among mankind, right? But that what gets us there is private property, right? That's why Mises was so focused on, that liberalism is essentially the partly the belief in, almost entirely the belief in private property, not because private property is the good itself, but it's the best means for creating that peaceful society based on social cooperation. And how that ties it back into everything here is that I don't know that just preaching the aspirational part gets us to the aspiration. I think we have to have, listen, there's a division of labor. We need people like you, Jim. We need people
thank you.
Yes, we need people like Jack Lloyd. We need people like the Jacob Hornbergers of the world. We need the people who are so committed to the libertarian principle that they're shouting it from the rooftops, that anytime even one person is damaged or harmed by the state, that they are there advocating for for those people against the state aggression. I do that a lot myself on matter. My heart is ultimately aimed at foreign policy. That's where I talk about the most, and the consequences of American imperialism. So that always has to happen. But then we also need the people who specialize in, how do we get the Ring of Power to Mount Doom? We all agree it needs to get there, but we don't have magic, we don't have magic eagles that are going to take it there for us, right? Like, well, we have to, and it's all analogies break down, but you get my point that I think we need both. We need to have a grasp on the theory and a grasp on how to get there. And I think that, connect what bridges the two is the legal theory and the private property rights component, because the closer we get to approximating and allowing people to behave based on what private property allows them to do and to not do, and understanding the degree to which different state policies get us away from that ideal, that I think is key to getting us to move towards the aspirational, right? Because I think it's great to be aspirational, but I don't want to just be aspirational for aspirational sake. And yes, my final word here will be that we do have to trust God. Like, I'm Reformed. I trust God for salvation, period. Right? I think it's entirely a choice of God. I also think that there's
there's like a predetermined number of immigrants that's the right number? Is that how this works?
Don't distract me.
Sorry. Well,
don't derail me.
I'll let you finish, but I have a problem.
Calvin's immigrant. That'll be interesting.
I'll try to land now.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. I derailed you at the beginning, so you're derailing me at the end here.
Yeah.
This is the problem with spontaneous order again. This whole open, unscripted green room idea. Whoever came up with that is an idiot. My idea. So yeah, I think that. Man, I totally lost my train of thought. What was I even saying? I trust in God for salvation. That it is an act, it is Christ's work upon the cross which saves me, and not an ounce of my effort. But God does work through people, and he chooses to work through the church for salvation, to go and preach the gospel. And then I just got off a live stream with Ben, and we're talking about the importance of the church as more than just a worship service that just gives us good music and a nice little inspirational word, but that the sacraments and the rituals are all there as part of the process of orienting us towards God and sanctifying us as we prepare for eternity, right? So God is sovereign over everything, but he still calls people to go out and be bold and courageous and to act in the world. And there's a division of labor in the body of Christ. There's a division of labor in how libertarians preach and advocate for and move us towards a freer society. So that's my last word.
So Jim, I'm going to actually give you the last word, but I want to interject something here on Jacob's analogy about taking the ring to Mount Doom. What I want to know is how is it that these, like, you just praised the people like Jim Babka, Jack Lloyd, Jacob Hornberger, Alex Nowrasteh, who need to, shout from the rooftops, mountaintops, whatever. Like, here's the position, here's the aspiration. And what I want to know is if everybody who's not quite doing that, if their division of labor is something different. So they're Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings, right? How do I know that those people are acting in a way that is pushing the ring to Mount Doom and not looking at the ring and saying, well, I have it, why don't I use it? Mm-hmm. Because to me, sounds like it's more happening that way than they're like, no, we got to get to Mount Doom. And it's fine if you think that they're leading us to Mount Doom to throw away the ring, to destroy the ring, that's fine. But I haven't heard that case. And I don't mean just in this conversation. I just mean generally, I don't see how this is working.
But that's where we trust God. Like, I agree that there's a component about that's faith. We can't centrally plan it. But just because we can't centrally plan it doesn't mean then we just hide the ring in the Shire and just hope for the best.
Yeah. Jim, what do you have to say? We do have to wrap up. We started late, and I don't want to take y'all's time too much. So we'll wrap it up here. I'm sure we'll have a conversation sometime in the future. Maybe publicly. Well, a couple of things. I still am working, not full time anymore. I can't with Downsize DC, and Downsize DC was always directional. You can hear it in the term, right? We're headed in a direction of downsizing. And we promoted the Read the Bills Act, the Write the Laws Act, and the One Subject at a Time Act. We sat down and wrote a set of reforms several years ago for Social Security, healthcare. Like, we've taken the time to try to advance bills on these subjects and stop bad ones from getting passed, because that work does matter. My professional role now today has me, I spend an awful lot of time on the phone or in meetings with people who are calling me because they want to know how to do something, not why we should do something, not the philosophy of doing something, but how we execute it. So I live in that land all day. But when you get a chance to do something like I'm getting to do tonight, or those gentlemen got to do on the stage at Soho, those are rare opportunities where you have a chance to hold up a standard and to tell people what the world really would look like if we could do things the right way. And it's just so fundamentally important that we do that. So I laid out my case about what I thought happened on my show, Grace-Archy. And I do my show about the debate. I talked about Alex and Dave. It's one of our recent episodes. So you can, in fact, I think it's episode 130. If you want to go watch it, Grace-Archy with Jim Babka. Even the creation of that show, Grace-Archy, is about the need for us to sit down and talk to the people that we disagree with and begin to build bridges on things so that people can begin to understand. But I think the most undermarketed, most misunderstood idea is that freedom works. And Jacob, I'm going to choose to use my last word to say that I don't think property gets us there. I think the property analysis works great almost all the time. It's a fantastic heuristic tool. But where it falls shy is in these issues where individual liberty matters, and people can start to get confused and start to raise things to a certain level of abstraction. They can, for example, say that a border is the same thing as a property line. They're not even remotely similar. A border is a political division. It says on this side of the line, we fleece the sheep this way, and on the other side of the line, we fleece the sheep the other way. It means that we're owned. It's the boundary of our ownership. Now, we like our master over here better than the masters maybe on the other side of that line. And so we're somewhat grateful for the line most days, but that's all it is. It's not a property. It's not your property. It's not my property. But every time we get stuck talking about this, we're talking about the wrong thing. We're talking about abstraction. So I know you're not a big fan of open borders and closed borders, dividing it into that. I'm not either. And I just had this epiphany here very recently. And I had it and I shared it in the Dave Smith show. And that is that I am not for open borders anymore. I'm for the free movement of human beings. That's what I'm for. Because the border is a political abstraction. It's a way to turn this into a debate. And what you will find, and this is what we're doing with the principle of human respect, and this is what I'm hoping the Libertarian Party is going to be doing more going forward, because I've been talking to them quite a bit. So have a few other of my friends. What I hope is going to happen is that we stop talking about the object and we start talking about the people. So, we have the gun issue. And in the case of guns, you have the left, which are hoplophobes. They're scared of an inanimate object.
And they say we can't have those except in the hands of experts. We have to take them away from the people. And they have a reason for doing that. And then on the other side, you have people go, no, guns are the greatest thing that's ever been made. They're fantastic. I mean, don't you dare touch my guns. And that's the conservative right position. And so when you talk about a school shooting, they say, one side says, well, it's because we have too many guns. And the other said, no, it's because we don't have enough metal detectors or policemen in the buildings, or there's too many psychotropic drugs or whatever, because everything becomes about protecting the drug. And then I want to come along, and I want every libertarian to come along and say, wait a minute, what about the persons? So what's the real fear in each of the cases? Well, they're security. They're worried about people getting hurt. Both sides want to protect people, right? They're fundamentally human and they want to protect people, but their solutions are both focused on things, stuff, inanimate objects or abstractions. And I want us to talk about the people. I want us always to be advancing the people, the individuals. That's the essential unit. Humans matter. They were made in the image of God. That is the solution that gets us 100% of the way there.
Gentlemen, I really appreciate this conversation. I thank you for letting us go over a little bit on our time that we committed to earlier today. Jim, it sounds like you've had a day, and hopefully this was at least somewhat of an uptick in
this is fun.
In yours.
This is fun. And you guys are absolute mensch. Both of you are an absolute mensch. I appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate hearing that from you. And for everybody listening and doing the live stream, thank you for joining us. For those listening later, please join us for live stream. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Libertarian Christians and the Biblical Anarchy podcast.
If you don't watch the videos, you don't watch all the cool hand gestures and me fussing with my hair because I need a haircut.
And putting in eye drops.
Because you're
all of
missing
that.
all sorts of here.
Well, I will do a
folks.
Quality, yes, of course. I'm going to plug for those who are watching live. Tonight is Monday, June 9th, and June 11th through the 13th is Freedom Fest. And LCI will be at Freedom Fest. We will be with Norman Horn and his wife, Caitlin, and Ben Jaffone, who is the author of House Divided, which is just over my shoulder here. And also Cody Cook, who is the author of The Anarchist Anabaptist, as well as The Pocket Anabaptist, and I can't remember all the titles of his books because he's written a bunch.
The next one is going to be The Pocket Anarchist Anabaptist.
I'm going to have to try to convince him to do that. But anyway, they will be there. We will be giving out books with any donation at Freedom Fest. And you will be able to meet them, get it signed, and hopefully you'll come say hi if you're at Freedom Fest this week. So anyway,
you don't want him to do a coffee table version of that?
That was good. That was nice. For those who have listened to the end of the audio and stayed on with us for the live stream, that was worth it. So, Jim, Jacob, thank you for joining us.
Godspeed.